I'm going to start this off by saying this is by far the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. I was browsing Craigslist looking for a new TV. I saw a 55-inch smart TV listed for $150. I contacted the seller and asked if it was still available and told him that I was really interested. He said yes, and he asked me if I would like to come by to take a look at it. And I said yes, of course. That's when he asked if I could come check it out later that night. He sent me his address, and so I looked up where he was located. He was about a half hour away, which was a little longer than I felt like driving, but I said to hell with it and went anyways. He said he worked late on Fridays and asked if I could be there at 9:30. I thought about it for a bit, but like I said, I just decided to go. I really wanted the TV, and my friend Mason was coming with me as well to help ensure my safety. Mason didn't come inside with me though. He stayed in the car. Even though that wouldn't be much help had something gone sideways, it still made me feel better knowing that someone was just right outside and that he knew where I was. When I got there and knocked on the door, he answered almost immediately. "Hey man, how are you?" he asked me with a smile on his face. "I'm good, what about you?" He then shook my hand and asked if I'd like to come inside and look at the TV. "Well, of course I do," I said. "So you didn't bring anyone with you?" he asked. No, why?" I said. "Oh, nothing, no reason, I was just curious is all. I get worried sometimes about meeting up with people because I've had bad experiences in the past," he said. "Oh, yeah, I get it," and I let out a bit of a nervous laugh. I was thinking about how that was such a weird question to ask someone in this certain situation. Yeah, I lied to him because it felt necessary, and it was dark outside anyways, and my car windows were tinted, so if he tried to look outside and in or at my car or anything, he wouldn't have saw Mason anyways. We made small talk for a few, and all of a sudden I heard some weird yelling. It was kind of muffled sounding though. It was very faint, but I could still hear it just slightly. "What was that noise?" I asked. "Oh, that's nothing. It's probably just my two boys roughhousing in their bedroom," and he pointed down the hallway. That was the exact moment that I knew something was wrong, because the yelling I heard did not sound like it was coming from where he pointed, like at all. It sounded like it came from the complete opposite side of the house actually, almost like underneath us or something. I thought I was just being paranoid though, and I didn't want to seem crazy, so I dropped it. He asked if I was okay and said I seemed like I was on edge. I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. No worries at all." "Okay, good," he said. "Let's take a look at the TV now so I can get you out of here quicker," he said. "Just follow me downstairs. I have it set up and plugged in down there in our guest bedroom, so that way you can see it works." He opened the basement door and moved his hand in such a way that implied he wanted me to go first. So I did. I felt a little uncomfortable, but I still felt like I was just overthinking. The first step I took, he pushed me down the stairs. Immediately I tripped and rolled all the way down. Luckily I didn't break any bones somehow, but I hit my head multiple times on my way down on the wooden stairs. When I got to the bottom and I was working myself to get back up, he was standing over me with a crowbar and he didn't say a word. He just stared at me for a few seconds. Then he swung and tried to hit me in the head with it, but somehow I managed to dodge it. I then kicked him in the stomach. I grabbed the opposite side of the crowbar that he was holding as he bent over and I whacked him right in the head with it. He dropped to the ground and passed out immediately. I took no chances and ran up the stairs as quickly as possible, screaming for help and yelling Mason's name. As I was leaving, I heard someone screaming for help in the basement, but I couldn't bring myself to investigate it further. I just had to leave. I got in the car and drove off, and I was freaking out, like borderline hyperventilating, while trying to explain to Mason what just happened. And then I told him how I thought there was someone else down there in that basement who had been like trapped down there or something. I couldn't even form my own thoughts. My heart told me to go back and to try to help whoever was down there, but I just couldn't. We called the police and they showed up to the scene very quickly. I told them everything that was going on. Mason said we had to drive back to the house so we could talk to the police when they got there. As much as I didn't want to, I knew he was right. When we got back less than 10 minutes later, there were already 3 police cars there. We waited out there by the end of the driveway for one of the officers to come out and to talk to us, so we could tell them our side of the story and to see what was going on. The man was still passed out on the ground when the police got there, apparently. They put him in cuffs and got him to a hospital. I don't know all the charges he was being charged with, but he'll be getting locked up in prison for a very, very long time. Maybe even a life sentence, because I heard he has a very lengthy past, and they are still investigating his case. Turns out he had 2 other people in the basement, locked away into 2 separate cages, the size your average dog would fit in. He had been torturing them, and Lord only knows what else. There is not a single hour that goes by that I haven't thought about this. I've been going to this therapist though. He helps me a lot, but I'm still really messed up from it all. It haunts me every single day of my life. I haven't put on Prozac for my anxiety. I just wanted it to all go away. The thoughts, the nightmares, my trauma, everything. Every day is a battle for me right now, but I'm trying my best to stay positive. That's all I can do, right? I used to buy iPhones, video game systems, TVs, and tons of other stuff on Facebook Marketplace and flip them on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a profit. I've been doing this for years now as a side hustle, and I've learned a lot along the way. I would mostly try to flip iPhones because they seem to have the highest profit margin. This particular time I had got my hands on this iPhone X for like $155. This was over a year ago, so that was an insanely good deal. You'd be surprised how low you can talk these people down if you try. Most people will decline the ridiculous offer, but a lot of people just want quick cash, and they will sell to the first person who reaches out to them. So I took advantage of that completely. Anyways, I had listed the iPhone X for sale for $300, and I put in the description that I would consider the best offer. Usually these phones sell quick, so I was never too worried about declining offers less than $300. Because most of the time, I could get the phone sold within a week for the original asking price if I just waited. After only an hour of posting the listing, I had someone reach out to me that was interested in the phone. She asked me a few questions and rearranged a meetup for the next day, late afternoon after she got out of work. She messaged me a few hours before meetup and asked if I could please just drive out to her house instead of meeting at Walmart like we had previously planned. I was immediately alarmed by that, but I went ahead and asked her for her address, so I could put it in my GPS app on my phone to see how far of a drive it was. She was just under 20 minutes away, which really isn't that far of a drive. And she was paying the full price of $300 for the phone, so I decided to do it. I told her I could drive to her house and that it wouldn't be a problem. And I just told her to let me know what time I should be there. She overly thanked me and proceeded to tell me how much of a lifesaver I was, and that she really appreciated me for helping her out. She then asked if I could come at 7:30 and that she would for sure be home at that time. I agreed, but I didn't like how late she wanted to meet. I had to wake up for work the next morning at 5 a.m., and I like to hang out at the house and get some me time in before I have to go to sleep. When she originally said we could meet after she gets out of work, she said late afternoon, so I was expecting that to be anywhere from like 4:30 to 6 o'clock maybe at the latest. But I just went along with it anyways, because I really wanted to sell the phone. This lady didn't live in a neighborhood. She lived on a road off of a main road in the city. She definitely had neighbors, but the area had more of a slight rural feel to it. It was about 7:20 when I left, because I wanted to make sure she was going to be there when I got there. I let her know when I was on my way, and that I would be there in about 20 minutes. When I got there and knocked on the door, my anxiety tripled as I was waiting for an answer. It was starting to get dark, so that didn't help much either. When the woman opened the door, she introduced herself as Sabrina. She told me to come in and introduced me to her husband, who was sitting there on the couch in the living room. Almost immediately, they started harassing me, making fun of my clothes and the way I looked even. They tried to play it off as a joke, but I felt the passive aggressiveness strongly. Almost right away when I walked in, I had this weird feeling about these people. Something about them just felt very wrong. I think Sabrina was on some sort of drug, because she was acting weird and she just looked high on something. And I'm not talking about weed, I'm talking about serious hard drugs. Like her eyes were all sucked into her face and she was as pale as a ghost. She had to have been on something, just trust me. because she was just not acting right. Not like a normal person would anyways. She was being rude and slightly demanding the whole time I was there, and arguing with her husband about how much she was willing to pay for the phone. I let them look at the phone. Sabrina wanted to put her SIM card in the phone before she bought it because she wanted to make sure that it would work. She then started complaining about a tiny crack that was on the phone, even though I said in the description that there was a small crack, and it was completely visible in the pictures I took. She started getting upset and saying I was trying to scam her. She said she wouldn't pay more than $200 for it. I immediately said no and asked for the phone back. She continuously tried to negotiate, and I told her I wouldn't do a dime less than $250. I made it very clear I wouldn't take anything less than that. Well, she didn't like that very much. She took her SIM card back out of the phone and quite literally threw it at me. And I mean, she really threw it at me, like really hard. The phone hit me directly in the face, and then it fell on the ground after it bounced off my head on the hardwood floor. It landed on the screen and completely shattered the phone screen. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I asked. Then she ran off somewhere, of which I assumed to be her bedroom, and started yelling and like crying hysterically. Her husband tried to calm me down, and he gave me like $100 for me to not call the police. I took the $100 and I didn't call the authorities, even though I was still tempted to. I kept my word though and stayed true to our agreement. Part of me didn't even want to deal with the situation anymore, if I'm being honest anyways, so that's part of the reason why I didn't call the cops. Why the hell would anyone act like that? Especially a grown adult. I don't know, man. Beats me. People are crazy. She was probably just trying to win one over on me by gaslighting me and making me feel bad so she could get what she wanted. She said she would do the $300 before I got there, so I was really pissed off about the whole situation. The crack on the phone that she was complaining about was unbelievably small as well. It was more of a scratch, honestly. I ended up fixing the phone screen for like $70, I think, and I sold it a few days later for the full $300. I have completely learned my lesson though, and never will I again be driving to someone's house for a Craigslist transaction or meetup. Nowadays I refuse to meet anywhere other than the police station. One day I was browsing Craigslist out of pure boredom. I wasn't looking for anything specific at all, and I didn't even know at the time that people use Craigslist for dating, or like meeting new people and to make new friends or whatever sometimes. But after I did some digging, I found out that it was definitely a thing. I was really bored and I was pretty lonely, so I started looking through the listings. There was a guy named Tom who was really handsome. He said he was 32. I was 34 at the time, so we were pretty much the same age. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I'm a very laid-back person though, so whatever happens, happens type of thing. He had a good vibe and he seemed like a real person. And he wasn't like overly attractive, so I wasn't worried about a catfish situation much either. He was definitely handsome though, and everything about his bio I liked. We seemed to be into all of the same things, so I gave it a chance. We started talking and eventually he got my number. We talked for a few days over text and over the phone as well. It was also a plus because he was less than 10 minutes away from me. He asked if I would like to go out that weekend at a nearby bar on Saturday. I said yes, and we continued talking. Things escalated fast, and we very quickly went from friendly conversations to very flirtatious talking. On our first date at the bar, when we met on Saturday, everything was going well. We made small talk, got pretty drunk, ate good food, and I had a lot of fun. I definitely liked this guy, and I had feelings for him. Later into the night, just before we were about to leave, I got a text from a random number that said, and I quote, "Stay away from my man. You better not be there with him when I get there." I was very confused, and I showed him the text I had received. He played it off like it was nothing and that he had no idea what it was about or who it was. He then became very awkward and started acting suspicious, like he wanted to leave right away. Right before we were about to go our separate ways, his girlfriend showed up. Yes, I said his girlfriend. He had a girlfriend this whole time. I was pretty upset, and I had been drinking, so I did not hold back on this woman at all. She started yelling at him and calling me all types of names and cussing at me. I started yelling back at her, and I guess she wasn't having it because she literally took her shoe off and threw it at me. Then she started attacking me with her purse and punching me, pulling my hair and beating the crap out of me. I tried to defend myself by grabbing her hair, but before I could, I fell to the ground and I hit my head on the concrete. I had to go to the hospital because I practically fainted. That whole night was one huge mistake. I still can't believe I was ever in a situation like that to begin with. I am a very quiet and reserved, decent and respectful person, so this whole thing was very out of my element, if you will. I don't even know how she found out about us, or even how she knew we were together at the bar. I'm glad she did find out though, before I got too invested in this guy and got my feelings hurt more than I already did. She ended up going to jail that night and got charged with assault. I walked away with no charges or jail time at all. I did walk away with a severe concussion though, and a big fat reminder of why I will never meet up with someone random from online again. I have a fiance now, and we've been together for over 5 years, and we are getting married next year. We plan on starting a family soon, and I have never been happier. This is just one of those stories I like to tell when warning people about the dangers of the internet and meeting up with a complete stranger. You never know what someone's true intention could be. Things could have gone a lot worse for me that night. My childhood best friend, Marie, and I were around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a nice campground about 2 hours from our hometown, and they would spend the entire summer out there each year staying in their camper. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night that I was there, we decided we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, still bright out but beginning to lose light. The path we took was down a short slope right next to the main road with maybe 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest, with more tall, thick brush and tons of trees. So we were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path, in front or behind us. But nonetheless, out of nowhere, we heard a sudden rustling sound and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of maybe a deer moving through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then, the sound of running footsteps followed. Marie glances back and suddenly grabs my arm, urging me under her breath to not look back. At the same time, the running stops. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and get a look for myself. I guess I could sense the very real fear in her, and I just chose to listen. We both start to panic, and we were getting that feeling like when you run up the stairs after turning the basement light off in the middle of the night when you were a kid. We pick up speed as much as we could without breaking into a full sprint, knowing the ice cream shop was only about a minute walk away at this point. The path soon breaks, and we're now in the parking lot. Suddenly, Marie steers me hard to the left, and we were now heading towards the lake in the boat rental area instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop. I go along with it silently, understanding that ice cream is no longer an interest right now. Marie is clearly panicking at this point. We are both looking around, but it seems like whatever scared her is nowhere in sight. We then walk up to the boat rental and get us a kayak, and we climb in and begin to paddle out into the middle of the lake. As we paddle, she tells me that there was a man behind us, and that the man had stopped running at us very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He had been wearing a long black coat with the hood up, despite it being the middle of July, and he had a terrible smirk on his face. She swore that as he stopped running, she saw him put something shiny away in his coat. He appeared to just have emerged out of the bushes after we walked past, given the sounds we heard earlier in the trails. We reached the center of the lake and quit paddling, so I pull out my Nokia brick phone that my parents had thank God given me just in case. I handed it to Marie and I told her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone rings, I see her look out past me to the shore and go pale. She was lifting her hand and pointing to show me what she was seeing. I turned, and there was the man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake, staring out at us. We sat in the middle of the lake and watched him do 2 full laps, never looking away from us once, before finally disappearing. It took a few tries to get a hold of her family, and we were freaking out so bad the whole time. The sun eventually set, and it was dark out. We finally managed to get her mom on the phone to come by with the truck to come pick us up. I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't been able to call for a ride. Looking back, I don't know why we didn't just go up to the ice cream shop and inform an adult there and ask for her parents to come get us then. But it worked out. We got back home safe, and we thankfully never saw the man again. This happened quite a while ago when I was home alone with just my dog. So I was watching TV one night at about 11 p.m. when I hear a car pull up outside and the engine shut off. I figured it was obviously a neighbor, but my nosy dog wanted to have a look, and he went to the window. He kind of messed up the blinds when he went to look, so I had to get up to fix them. When I did, I noticed a car parked out on the street across from my house and my neighbor's house. I couldn't really make out any details, but it looked like the driver was still sitting in the car. I didn't really think anything of it. I went to my kitchen and got something to drink out of the fridge, and I went back to watching TV. Quite a while had passed since I fixed the blinds, but I'm not sure how long. I'd guess 15 or 20 minutes. Out of nowhere, I thought I heard a light tapping sound at the door. Not a knock, it was much lighter and very quiet. My dog had sat up to look at the door again, and I paused the TV when the same tapping then started on the window. I opened the blinds a little and saw a man standing there. I couldn't make out his face properly, but he immediately walked back to the door and started tapping on it again. I'm sure this doesn't sound very frightening to some of you, but I'm not sure why I suddenly had a very awful feeling. I felt absolutely terrified and I had no idea why. I live in a good neighborhood, and bad things like this are not very prone to happening around here, and they just really don't in general. The tapping at the door never stopped, but something in my head was saying if I opened the door, then something really bad would happen. So I went upstairs to open a window to speak with him from up above, to ask what he wanted. It just felt safer to me doing this. He said in a really quiet voice that he was delivering pizza and told me how much it costed. I felt so stupid for being so frightened right then, and I told him I didn't order a pizza. I guessed he was speaking quietly and knocking lightly so he didn't disturb my neighbors. My dog had followed me upstairs and was letting out this odd growl and bark, which isn't really unusual for him. I was trying to shush him when the man downstairs told me he had the correct address, and I better get downstairs now to open the door and to pay for what I owed, and to collect my food before it gets cold. I was really confused because I most definitely didn't order any food, and I began to tell him that I didn't. But then I noticed he didn't even have a pizza in his hands. He wasn't carrying anything at all. I told him again that he had the wrong address, and he got really angry with me. He kept telling me to open the door. He was going between angry and sort of trying to persuade me to come back downstairs and to open the door. I asked him where the pizza was, and he said he had a hold of it. It was really dark, but I could definitely see that he didn't have anything in his hands. My dog was really making quite a bit of fuss at this point, and the stranger had turned into a broken record. Come downstairs, open the door. Come downstairs and open the door, just over and over again. All the noise must have alerted my neighbor, who did open his door, because my neighbor came outside and yelled at him and told him to get out of here. The man didn't say a word, but he practically sprinted across the street to his car that I had heard when he pulled up a little earlier on. He went back to the car empty-handed. I have no idea what he wanted, but he certainly wasn't a delivery driver. It really freaked me out as well because my dog is quite obviously a large breed, and the man saw him through the window, and the man wasn't deterred at all. It seems even stranger and less random that he actually drove to my house as though he planned on showing up. I don't know what he was planning to do. I had just gotten out of an 8-year abusive relationship, and I met someone on a popular online dating app. To be honest, I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to go watch a movie or have a drink with every now and then. I had 2 boys and was happy in living a peaceful life on my own after going through hell. So I meet this guy who was just a couple years older than me, and he had turned his life around completely. When he was younger, he used to be in gangs and would do drugs and that kind of thing. But now he was sober and into working out and staying really fit and doing family stuff, and he left the gang life behind. I guess you can say I felt protected by him. He was a hard worker, self-sufficient, had a son, and he loved going to the gym every day. I myself had kind of a crazy past, but I overcame it, so we seemed like a good fit for each other. We would go to dinner, the movies, or I would have him over at my place sometimes on the weekend. Normal dating stuff, but eventually he wanted to spend more and more time together, and I was having trouble giving up all my free time for him. And he would get really angry about this, like really angry. After being with a controlling, possessive man for so long, this was obviously a red flag, and after 3 months, I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. But then he said he needed to confess something to me. He admitted to me that he had been using steroids, and that was the reason for his mood swings. He cried, and he said he was sure that that was the reason, and that he was willing to stop it if it meant we could have another chance together. I unfortunately obliged, but only under the condition that we remained friends for now. Things were okay for a while. We saw each other maybe once every other week, and he started wanting to see me every week again, and eventually every day. To which I told him that I was not interested in being anything other than friends at the moment, since I was not ready for a relationship. He tried to talk me into giving him another chance, but I just didn't find myself interested in him in a romantic way, so I insisted that we just be friends. I stopped talking to him because I got kind of annoyed at his persistence. He would always ask me about my whereabouts and ask for pictures of who I was hanging out with, and I literally had to tell him that this is not what friends do. He just insisted that he was innocently trying to see what I was up to. Fast forward to 6 months later, and I hadn't spoken to him at all within that time. I was happy and living my life, and slowly things were starting to go back to normal. But one night, when my youngest son was at his dad's, I went out to a local bar with some friends. My oldest son, who was 13 at the time, was home alone, so I left the bar a little early. That way I would be home by 10 p.m. Shortly after I got home, I laid down and went to sleep. I was dead asleep when I suddenly feel someone slowly sit on my bed. I remember wondering why my son would come sit on my bed in the middle of the night. In my half-awakened like haze state, I realized he wouldn't. I turned around, and it's not him. It was Max, my ex. He was laying down in bed next to me. I sat up and asked him how he got in, but he wouldn't answer my question. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Okay, but when you need to talk to someone, you don't just sneak into someone's house and into their room in the middle of the night. You call them, or you leave a note for them. Literally anything but this," I said. "I don't have your number anymore. I needed to talk to you before it's too late," Max said. I didn't even entertain the part where he said before it's too late, because I was livid, but something told me to keep my cool. I sat up and I said, "Look, I really want to talk to you too, but not like this. Please just leave, and I promise we'll talk tomorrow. Just call me tomorrow." So that's when he gets up and walks over to my side of the bed and starts rubbing my shoulders and is slowly making his way to my neck. He said, "Do you really want to talk?" I looked him in the eyes and I said, "Yes. I've been wanting to talk to you, but not like this. Like I said, please just call me tomorrow." He stares at me while rubbing my neck and goes down to my shoulders, and then he lets go and says okay. Then he proceeds to exit through my patio door and jumps over the fence in my backyard, which told me that is exactly how he got in. So obviously, after he left, I freaked the hell out when I checked on my kid, but he had no idea what was going on. He was fast asleep. I made sure that all the doors and windows were locked in the house, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day I texted him, and I told him that if I ever see him near me or if he comes to my house ever again, especially unannounced, that I will call the police to make sure he gets arrested. If you're wondering why I didn't call the cops to begin with, I knew he had a gun, so A, I was scared of being retaliated against for being a snitch, and B, I figured if I called the cops, they would probably not do much, or that he would be bailed out of jail and they would just let him out. And I was afraid of what he would do after the fact. Either way, he left me alone and I didn't hear from him for years. 4 years later, I'm going through Facebook and I see his face in People You May Know. I clicked on the picture and I noticed that it looked like a jail picture. Like it looked like he was in jail. I scroll down through his page and his most recent post is him posting his address for his family members to write to. It was a prison address. So I googled his name and sure enough, articles after articles all off the same headline. Man arrested on suspicion of killing girlfriend. About 2 years after him and I dated, he shot and killed the girl he was dating. That could have been me, and I feel like shit thinking if there was anything I could have done to stop him. And an even scarier thought is that he only got 12 years for her murder. So I've lived on my own for about 2 years now. I have a very small home that I'm able to pretty comfortably afford. I have an attic area, and at a guess I'd say it's about 5 by 5 meters in size. You can really only stand in there in the very center. Anyway, I work the night shift at a factory. I usually get home around 8 a.m. I was coming home from work one morning during a heavy storm, and when I got home, I went straight to sleep. When I woke up, I went on my phone and saw that I had a bunch of notifications from before I went to sleep. I have cameras set up inside and outside of my home. I saw that one of the cameras had been tripped at 7:42 a.m. I got home around 8:10 to 8:15 in the morning. I checked the video and I saw that it was a man. He was pressed tight up against my bedroom door and he was fumbling around with the handle. He did this for about 10 seconds until he spotted the camera. Once he did, he very quickly ran away. This unsettled me and disturbed me greatly, but I didn't make a huge scene. I looked all throughout my house and there wasn't a sign of anyone, so I chose to forget about it, and I figured he was spooked by the camera and just ran away for good. I honestly thought that was going to be the end of it. I got around to making myself some food and I discovered something in my kitchen. My back window was open, in the dining room. The rest of the day consisted of this, me noticing small things that didn't seem right and scaring myself. All up until I left for work at 10 p.m. I spotted something that made my heart leap into my throat. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see it. My attic entrance was slowly being slid open. I can so vividly remember questioning my sanity. Surely I was just hallucinating or something. I looked over at it, rubbed my eyes, and I absolutely saw something that stopped me in my tracks with fear. I saw fingers wrap around the hatch and the door was moving more, and very slowly. I didn't know what to do. I could feel the panic beginning to really get to me, and I wasn't sure if I should leave the house and call the police, or if I should try to yell at whoever was up there. I chose a mixture of both. I began calling 911 and I ran to my bedroom where I could lock the door. As soon as I began running, I heard the hatch get almost ripped off with the speed they moved it, and I arrived at my bedroom door. I looked down the corridor and watched for a second, seeing only a little slice of the blackness up in my attic. I saw the human hand still holding onto the sides of my ceiling. I yelled, "Whoever is there, I am calling the police and I have a gun. If you take a single step out of there, I will shoot you." The adrenaline was really making my hands and voice shake, but I tried sounding as tough as I could. He obviously wasn't very scared of my threat because he dropped down right through the hole of the attic onto the main floor. I slammed my door shut and I locked it as quickly as I could. I put my phone up to my ear and realized the 911 dispatcher was waiting for my response. I was able to get the police to my house and they showed up relatively quickly, thank God. I told him I didn't know if the man was armed or not, and the dispatcher told me to stay in the line. I then heard the man walking up to my door and he started rattling the door handle. He also seemingly went through my cupboards in my kitchen as I heard a lot of commotion out there. Truth be told, I don't know why he stayed. I would have just left the house if I were him, but he stayed right up until the police came in and arrested him. Apparently he was a homeless man and he was armed with a knife from my kitchen, and he had recently been seen in the area trying to get into other houses. This happened only 3 months ago and I'm very frightened to sleep still. I now sleep with my bedroom door locked and all the windows closed. I also sleep with a knife under my pillow. I know that's kind of crazy and that this is very unlikely to ever happen again, but I just cannot forget about what happened. So that's the story of the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. It all started about a month ago when a man started banging on our door at 6 at night, yelling for someone named Mike to come out, and that he needs to speak with him and that he needed cigarettes. I told him he had the wrong house and that he needed to leave. There has never been a Mike in my house, but he became even more aggressive, calling me a liar and how he was going to, and I quote, "come in and beat that skinny tramp that you live with." My dad and I are the only ones who live in the home, so I had no idea what he was talking about. I tried to call the non-emergency police line because I have never called 911 before, but they didn't pick up. Looking back, it was pretty stupid, but it was my instinct. After some more yelling, he finally left, thankfully. I called my father, who was across town, and asked him to stop by, and I told him about what was going on, and he showed up. He also called 911, and he filed a report himself. The guy eventually came back, and my dad started screaming at him and threatening him. The cops were called again, and they showed up an hour after the call. And they couldn't find him, and they told us to defend ourselves if it came to it. I ended up staying with a friend for the night because I didn't feel safe at home. I can be a strong person, I guess, but I don't think I can do much against a drugged out crazy man that's much bigger than me, who probably also had a weapon. What made this situation even scarier to me is that as I was going through some footage captured by my outside security camera, it showed clear video evidence of the same guy walking up to my house hours before our first altercation, and I had no clue. I have really bad anxiety, so the next few days were filled with paranoia and stress, but I managed to finally calm down and convince myself that this was the end of it. Come that weekend, my father went on a trip with his girlfriend, so I was left alone for a couple of days, and I wouldn't be able to have his help. I just put on a scary movie when I heard screaming again and a loud bang on my front door. I pulled up my camera to see what was going on, and there was a man that was pacing back and forth on our sidewalk, and he had thrown over our trash can, again, screaming for Mike. I called 911 and they showed up within minutes this time, and they were able to find him down the street. They tell me that there was nothing that can be done since he hadn't committed a crime yet, but if he comes back to call again, and that they'll have more of a reason to arrest him. I thought this was complete horse crap because he had been harassing us for days, but whatever. There was nothing I could do, so I tried to forget about it and I hoped for the best. Things were quiet for a few weeks. I again believed that this was going to be the end of it, until the next day, that is. It was the very next morning that my father and I got into an argument, so I wanted to take a walk to clear my mind. I went across the street to a park and I sat by a tree where I watched cars pass every now and then. Just beautiful morning weather. I noticed a truck drive down the left side of the park and turned to the street that my back was facing. He waved as he passed by, and so I did too, thinking it was just a man going to work or something. He then pulls off onto the right side of the park, stops, makes a U-turn, and came back. He was now heading in my direction again. Red flags instantly go off in my head, so I get up to start walking home. I look back and I saw that he had turned off his headlights and he was tailing me. I get to the front of my house and he slows down. I got a better look at his face this time, and he looked exactly like the man that had been harassing us. From the physical characteristics to his red baseball cap, he just glared at me like I took everything in his life away from him. I eventually made it to the front door of my dad's house and I tried to barge in, but my father locked the door out of anger of me walking out and our heated argument. So I had to yell to him that I was being followed and to open the door. He finally opened the door, and by then the truck was gone down the street. I'm terrified to leave my home. I don't have a car to get anywhere quickly. All I have is a bike, but even now I'm scared to ride that. I don't know who this man is or what his intentions are, but I live in paranoia, waiting. A few years ago, I had just moved into the house I live in now. I moved in around September, and this happened in December. We had just had a large amount of snow, so much so that my work had been closed for the day. I spent the day being lazy around the house and generally not doing anything unless I had to. My basement is set up as a game and TV room, and it's where I was spending most of my day off. I had the TV on while watching something, and I was kind of just laying on the couch, when suddenly, I heard someone banging at the door, loud. I could hear it all the way in the basement and above the sound of my surround system. They probably hit the door a good 5 or 6 times. Now I live in a pretty relaxed neighborhood, super suburban area, and it's quiet as a mouse at night. I had friends dropping by occasionally to see my new house, so I kind of assumed that it was one of them at first, just being an asshole and hitting the door as hard as they could to mess with me. Since it kind of annoyed me that they had been so obnoxious about it, I just sat and watched some more TV, just to let whoever it was sit out there, and if it was a friend, they would call or text, and if it was someone selling cookies or something, then they could piss off. Why someone would be out selling cookies after a snowstorm when the roads were coated in ice, I didn't really think about that, but anyhow, I eventually decided to go up and see if maybe there was something left on the porch, or if it was a friend and they were waiting for me to open the door. I glanced out the curtain, but I didn't see anyone, and so I opened up the door. No one was there and nothing was on the porch. In the street, covered in snow and ice, mind you, was a black Cadillac with about 4 people inside, slowly creeping up the street. One of them was just at the exact moment of climbing in the back of the car as it creeped along.
He heard my front door open and looked back at me. He just stared at me until they had moved too far up the street for me to see. I thought it was weird, but I just locked the door and went back to my day off. Later that day, it hit the news that further up my street, about a quarter mile or so, there had been a home invasion. A woman had been asleep upstairs in her house, and the 4 people had thought the house was empty when they broke in. They eventually tied her up and robbed her house at gunpoint. She finally untied herself and went to a neighbor, who then called the police and went back over with another gun to check the place out, but they were already gone. I'm fairly certain that these same 4 people were the ones I saw outside of my house, and if I hadn't decided to go upstairs and open the door when I did, they might have thought my house was empty and kicked my door in instead. I can still see the guy staring at me in the eyes, as if he was weighing the cost of robbing my house with me in it against looking for an easier target, but I guess they found one. I've been working at a department store for the past 2 years. Although retail wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, it was much better than my previous job in the food business, so I was grateful to not have to touch food all day, and I would take the world of customer service much more gracefully than the food industry. It was the middle of January, and the store is usually quite dead towards the end of the day. Usually the following month after Christmas is never really busy, due to people probably not trying to spend money after the gift-giving season, and the cold weather of the winter season. In Canada, it never really helped the situation much. Also, people not in the mood to leave the comfort of their own houses in the middle of a snowstorm. That meant that they put less people on shift, and I was alone in the fitting room. I work at a pretty big store, and alongside the weather conditions, that meant that employees were usually spread out on the floor, not within close proximity in comparison to what they put during the busy season. None of us wore earpieces, as we did most of our paging through the speaker system. It was a Wednesday night around 8, and the store closed at 9. I was usually put on the cash register, but often frequented the fitting room when they needed help. It was a very quiet night, and I spent the first couple hours of my shift helping organize the beauty section that is right next to the fitting room, or speaking to my lovely coworker who worked in the jewelry section, helping the few customers that actually wanted to try clothes on when they came by. There was a man who came to the fitting room with 2 dress shirts, and I didn't think anything of it. After all, he was nothing I've never seen before. Older, tall, kind of stocky and muscular. Just plain. I did notice that he seemed dressed rather nicely though. A clearly expensive suit and a nice shoulder bag. I assumed he must have come to the store after his day at work. I counted the number of articles of clothing that he was bringing in, as that was mandatory in order for me to monitor the flow of clothes and try to stop theft. I handed him a number corresponding to the number of articles he was taking in, and I asked him politely to put the clothes back on the hanger, in French, rather than English, because Quebec requires us to speak French first to customers, to which he replied with a simple "no problem." I noticed he had a thick accent, although I wasn't and still not able to place my finger on it. I think it might have been Russian, but I can't say for sure. The man walked into the fitting room and I didn't really think much of it. I also helped the other customers who came out of their rooms counting the articles they came out with and matched it with their numbers, and I hung them back up on their place on the rack. A few moments passed by and the man finally came out. Not really putting much thought into it, I took the clothes back from him as he didn't want any of them, and I took back his number and said thank you, and then I turned to place the clothes on their rack. Usually this was the point where the customer would just leave the fitting room in general, but when I turned around to go back to the front, he was still there. I asked him if there was anything I could do for him, or if he still wanted the shirts that I had just put away. The man just smiled and looked at me, not answering, and I felt a very weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. He was looking at me as if he wanted to say something, and me being the 5'4" girl who hates confrontation of any kind, I just nervously laughed and started to organize the desks at the front of the fitting room entrance, awkwardly arranging all the numbers, although they were already in order. He asked me for my name, to which I just looked down at the name tag I was wearing and repeated it. He told me it was a beautiful name. I laughed nervously, never knowing what to do in these sort of situations, and I just wanted to be nice to him, as it was a part of my job in customer service. Besides, he didn't technically do anything wrong, he just complimented me. I said thank you and I looked away, avoiding eye contact. He then just stood there for what felt like 20 minutes, but in reality it was probably only 3. He stood there as I helped other customers, and it was beginning to make me very uncomfortable. not wanting to be rude, but also not wanting to subject myself to being uncomfortable for the rest of my shift, or however long he was planning to be there. I asked him if there was anything else he needed help with. Here's when I began to get really scared. He proceeded to tell me that he will be waiting for me at 9:30 outside the doors of our store, and he wanted to take me out. Confused, I looked at him oddly. How did he know that we finished at that time? The store closed at 9, and we usually spent 30 minutes cleaning up the store. I suppose that information isn't super hard to guess, but it still felt weird. Why did he want to take me out? I once again laughed nervously, because that seemed to be the only thing I was able to do when uncomfortable, and I politely declined, saying I had to get home and study. He then laughed, taking a step closer to me, and I instinctively took a step back. He didn't accept my answer because he just smiled once more. I'll be waiting for you outside the door where all the employees leave from, in the truck alley. I'll be right there. There was a door that employees exited the mall from because the normal doors were usually locked around 9:15, and we always finish later than that, so we take the door that takes us in a slight alley where all the trucks go to drop off shipments for our store. Being someone who hates confrontation and who doesn't do well with controlling my emotions, I felt myself start to tear up at this exact comment. No employee is allowed to mention the door we leave from. It's a company rule. Since we usually finish late and the parking lot is dark, they don't want anyone to know where we exit from as a precaution. I told him once more that I appreciated his offer, but I wasn't interested, and I had to continue my work. I politely told him to leave when he put a hand on my shoulder, and I felt myself freeze up. I remember thinking and just praying that one of my coworkers would show up, or the jewelry employee would stop filling the cases and turn around. With my luck, though, nobody did. He told me I was a beautiful girl and that he couldn't wait to meet me in the alley at the end of my shift. He also said that he has a nice apartment and had a cute dog, as if the dog was going to make me change my mind and we could have a fun time. At this point, being absolutely desperate, I said I have a boyfriend and he was going to be picking me up, hoping that would deter him, but he just laughed. He said my name and then told me that wasn't something that usually stopped him. I honestly really began to feel scared, and I excused myself to use the phone on my desk, shaking his hand off of me that I hadn't realized was gripping on me so tightly. I paged the number for my coordinator, who curtly replied before I was even able to get a word in that she was busy with a customer and hung up. Unsure of what to do, as the man was still next to me, as he followed me to my desk, I called my manager, who thankfully replied. When he saw that I was speaking with someone on the phone, he left the fitting room, but that didn't make me feel any better. I told my manager what happened, and with good reason she freaked out, telling me I need to report him immediately, reminding me with people like that I have to be really careful. She told me to call security, and I did. The security guard told me he had an eye on him through the camera. It was around 8:30 at this point, and I was getting ready to start my closing tasks, still paranoid about what the man had said. This sounded like the beginning of an abduction movie to me, honestly. I eventually calmed down a little bit, not seeing the man anymore, when the security guard called me back. He wanted to let me know that the man had never left and was circling the store. I felt more dread than before pop up in my stomach. He didn't leave. Thankfully, he hadn't come back to see me, though. It felt kind of better for the fact that the security guard had seen him, so if anything did happen, there was at least someone who was able to identify him. By the time the store closed and it was time to leave, two of my coworkers, Evan and Ethan, two boys who worked in the warehouse, made sure to walk with me all the way to my car, not letting me be alone. I appreciated that a lot. Although I didn't want to admit it, I was scared walking through the alley, and I was even paranoid he was going to follow me home. I took the extra long route to see if anyone was trailing me, which he wasn't. When I walked through the safety of my door of my house and locked it behind me, I let go of a breath I wasn't even aware I was holding in. I make sure nowadays to leave the store using the buddy system. I never walk alone, and I always make sure I'm hyper aware of my surroundings. I never wear my name tag anymore. Luckily, nothing happened to me, and maybe I was overthinking the entire experience, but I wanted to stress that even if your job is in customer service, if someone makes you feel uncomfortable, speak up. You should not have to be subjected to this kind of behavior at your work, or anywhere for that matter. I'm a woman, and I was 52 at the time of this. I was traveling by car to an out-of-town job assignment. I had stopped at a popular and busy gas station to fill up the car, stretch my legs, and use the restroom, and probably grab a snack. I was approached by a developmentally disabled woman who appeared to be in her mid-20s. She was looking for a ride to a town a couple of towns over. I guess her ride had abandoned her while she was in the restroom. That was her story, at least. She was a little bit upset, and she didn't have a cell phone and didn't know any phone numbers so I could call someone to help her. I checked with the employees at the store, and they said that she had been there for over an hour looking for a ride because she said her friends left her while she was in the restroom. I then made the decision to do something I've never done before: offer a stranger a ride. I wasn't going to the town that she wanted to go to, but I was heading in that general direction. I told her I could drop her off at the grocery store in the next town where I would be turning off to go to my destination. The store was always busy, and it was very likely she'd have an easier time getting a ride to where she wanted to go. Also, she'd be 5 miles away from where she wanted to go instead of the 25 miles originally, and she would obviously have an easier time walking that distance if she had to. This was agreeable to her, and we set off. Right away, I noticed a van following us. I tried to lose the van, but it kept pace. Meanwhile, the woman wanted to play with my phone. I told her no, that it wasn't a toy, it was for work, and I moved it out of her reach. The van speeds up and starts to get closer. The woman suddenly remembers her boyfriend's phone number, and we need to call him. I can't use my phone while driving. This was pre-car sync era, and I was approaching the outskirts of the business district of the next town, and no cell phone use while driving signs were everywhere. I told her, we're almost to the grocery store, so we can call him from the parking lot when we get there. She becomes agitated and yells, "No, you have to take me home." I told you I can't do that though, I said. I'm not going there. It's in the opposite direction of where I need to go, and I'm expected soon. We'll call him from the parking lot, like I said. After this, she becomes more upset and frustrated, and the van is now getting closer. I pull into the grocery store parking lot, and it's about 4 p.m. The store is busy. I pull up in the front of the store and ask for her boyfriend's number. Suddenly, she can't remember his number. She won't get out of my car, and now she's arguing with me, and the van is pulling into the parking lot. Out of sheer luck, there's a sheriff's deputy parked nearby, and I roll down my window and signal that I need to speak to him. He walks over and asks me what's going on. I tell him where I met this woman, and now she won't get out of my car, and under my breath, I tell him the van has been following us. The deputy tells the woman, "She brought you where you asked her to, now it's time for you to leave her car." She slowly gets out of the car, and I ask once more for her boyfriend's number, and she says, "You're crazy, I don't have a boyfriend." "Oh look, there are my friends now." And she points to the damn van. The deputy and I share a look, and he says, "Give me your contact info. I can delay them for about 20 minutes while I check their license and registration and lecture them about abandoning a special needs adult. You get out of here and I'll check on you before my shift is over. And don't pick up any more hitchhikers." I left and went on to my destination. He later called me to make sure I got to where I was going and told me that they were keeping an eye on the van and its owner. He told me he also contacted a colleague at the sheriff's department in the county where I was working and that she should contact me in a day or two. While I was on assignment there, I spoke to 2 deputies and a detective about the woman and the van. No one ever told me anything about them, but they were very interested in them. My nightmare is one day I'll turn on a true crime show and see a report about this woman and her gang robbing and killing people. There's an unspoken rule up in the mountains that no matter who you are, friend, bitter rival, stranger, anyone, if you're ever in a pinch and come across another hunter's cabin, you're welcome to seek shelter there. Maybe it's unspoken because it's common courtesy and that whole do unto others thing. Or maybe it's unspoken because there's hardly anyone to speak to, in the winter months especially. You'd be hard-pressed to see another soul for weeks, sometimes even months. But that's the rule. You need it, you use it. No judgment, no questions asked. Just don't steal anything. Now, I'm not a burly seasoned mountain man that flosses with tree bark and never shaves, but I do like to hunt. I often leave my small Alaskan village for weeks at a time and take to my hunting lodge up in the mountains. I'm a fairly cautious guy, and I know the mountains can be traitorous, so when I leave prepared. I check the long-term forecasts and gather the necessary supplies, bring backups, and make sure I've got enough of everything that I need to survive at least a week longer than I plan on staying, just in case. I always believed that my precautions would protect me, but like a child's security blanket, they were only a paper-thin illusion of safety. There's really no planning when Mother Nature decides she's in a mood. That's why I never expected to get caught in a blizzard this day. It had started out sunny and cold, but as the day progressed, a few clouds formed. By the time they had massed into a heavy cloud covering, I was already on my way back to my cabin, with a couple of hairs hanging over my shoulders. I'd named them dinner and breakfast. I was planning on eating breakfast for dinner and dinner for breakfast, if only to make myself laugh. It's the little things like that that keep solitude from turning into loneliness. The snowfall seemed to come out of nowhere, like someone had knocked an awning shut and all the snow collected on top had fallen all at once. Except it wasn't a single tidal wave of snow, it was a relentless, unending assault. Last I checked, the weather reports hadn't mentioned a blizzard, and yet a blizzard was what I found myself walking through. It got very dark, very fast, and I kicked myself for leaving my flashlight back at my lodge. I'd planned on coming home long before nightfall, so I hadn't thought I needed it. I'd been sorely mistaken. Snow prickled painfully as it darted into my eyes. I had squinted almost all the way to keep those sub-zero jerks from stabbing me blind. The wind howled as gales cut through my clothes and right to my bones. I could barely see 2 feet in front of me, and I couldn't see the 2 feet beneath me as they sank in an ever-growing blanket of white. I'm not sure when I realized I was lost. At some point I knew I should have arrived at my cabin, but all I saw was white with a few slivers of gray swaying in the thick breeze. The hairs at the back of my neck became stiff and battered against me with every puff of air and every awkward crashing footfall. I was running out of energy, running out of ideas, and beginning to panic. I could have spun around in a computer chair 100 times and felt less disoriented than I did in that whiteout. Then I walked right into a cabin, literally. It had become so dark and the snow had become so heavy that I couldn't see the structure until I stumbled face first into it. I held my hands against the wood so I wouldn't lose it in the storm and circled around until I found a door. I wasn't just in a pinch, this was life or death. In the unlikely event someone was inside, I knocked on the door and waited for an answer. Through the howling wind, I could have sworn I heard, "Come in." As I swung open the door and stepped inside, a small avalanche of snow tumbled in with me. I didn't bother trying to kick it out as I fought against the wind to close the door behind me. The relief was instantaneous. Without the air whipping at me, I'd put a stop to the timer ticking down to my freezing death. "Thanks," I whispered. I turned towards the inside of the cabin and tried to get my bearings, but all I saw was blackness, which meant I had no real way of gauging the size of the cabin. Yeah, I'd circled around it, but I'd been stumbling around, half blind, focused on trying to find a doorknob, so I had no idea what length of the cabin I'd covered. I could have walked half of it. I could have circled around it 3 times without realizing it. Through the darkness, all I could see was the vague outline of someone sitting in the corner. "Hey, you're a real lifesaver," I said. He didn't answer. I pawed around for a lighter, a lantern, a matchbook, anything that might emit light, but all my fingertips touched were chains and the barrels of hunting rifles. I stopped poking around when I felt an open bear trap. Wouldn't want to get my arm caught in one of those. It was safer to sit still and wait for daybreak. It occurred to me that the stranger might have been seeking refuge as well, so I started, keeping my tone light and innocent. "You the owner of this cabin?" The answer was more of a hiss than a word, but in that hiss, I heard a faint yes. I sat on the floor, let my hairs down beside me, and reached into my pack. Why I'd taken a sleeping bag with me and not a flashlight was beyond me. I removed my wet clothes and quietly slipped into the sleeping bag to warm me up, making conversation as I did. "Hey, thanks again," I said. "That blizzard really came out of nowhere." He replied with the slow, labored, wheezy breath of an elderly man on his deathbed. "Dangerous." "Yeah," I chuckled. "That's an understatement." "Hungry," he exhaled. "You got a fireplace?" I asked. "I've got a couple of hairs. I'll cook them up. It's the least I can do." His reply was drawn out, like a wolf howling, but without the majestic hum. "No." "Okay, as soon as the blizzard dies down, I'll go gather wood and make us a fire. Can you wait until then?" I saw his silhouette shift slightly. There was a rattle of chains. No. Again, the O stretched out in a long, bloated groan. No. No, yes. The final no morphed strangely into a yes, like someone drastically changing to a much higher note on a flute, halfway through a breath. I craned my neck to look at the single window in the cabin. It was pitch black, or pitch white. It was like an afterglow, visible against the black backdrop of the wood, yet still inherently dark. I focused on it rather than the rest of the cabin because it was the only hint of light I could see. "If you don't mind, I'm going to try to catch some shut-eye," I said tiredly. He didn't respond, but that didn't surprise me. Mountain folk don't talk much, even when they come down to town for what few supplies they can't make themselves. I shrugged it off and settled in for the night, but I felt something hard against my side. Sighing, I tossed my hairs back a bit farther and got comfortable. I was exhausted, so it wasn't all that hard for me to drift off, despite the wind song playing outside the walls. I hugged myself in my sleeping bag and drifted off. I was awoken by a different sound. A weird snapping crunch that made me shoot up in my bed. Believing the ceiling was about to collapse under the weight of the snow, I braced myself, but as the sound came again, I realized it wasn't above me, but rather next to me, near my belongings. The silhouette was gone from the corner, and I could hear his deep, raspy breaths accompanying the crunch. "What the hell are you doing?" I snapped. He retreated back to his corner with a rattling of chains. My adrenaline was pumping, and I wasn't even sure why. Something about the stranger put me in a state of near panic. My instincts were telling me to leave, but I truly couldn't afford it. Whatever this guy was up to, I was safer with him than I was out there in that blizzard. I grabbed my backpack and propped myself against the wall in a seated position, staring at the silhouette, expecting him to make a move. I kept myself awake and alert, never looking away, even as the howling wind slowly diminished in strength. Once or twice, I felt my head begin to dip and my eyes begin to shut, but every time I slipped, the faint rattle of chains snapped me back into consciousness. As the blizzard cleared and the sun slowly rose, light began to trickle into the cabin. The scene filtered through in tiny increments with each layer uncovered by the sun, like a printer slowly spitting out the full picture one line at a time. I wasn't even in a cabin. I was in a large supply shed that was maybe 10 to 11 feet long and 7 to 8 feet wide. There was no fireplace, which makes sense for a supply shed. There were tools, traps, and rifles lining every wall. The silhouette in the corner slowly stopped being a silhouette and started being a distinct person. Skinny. No, actually gaunt. Pale. No, actually ghost white. Man. No, it was a corpse. I was gutted. He was dead. Not, "Oh shoot, I died overnight. Sorry about that, dead." Like long dead. Long dead. His body was all shriveled and mummified, if that's even the right word for it. He wasn't wrapped up in bandages or anything like that, but his skin was completely dehydrated and stiff like an unwrapped mummy. His hair was hanging from his head in unkempt strings. His teeth were poking out of his shrunken lips, with a wide gap where the top right canine should have been. There was a stain of age-old blood soaked in the wood beneath him. I followed it by gaze to its origin, his left foot, and the bear trap in which it had been gotten caught. There was an empty hook on the wall above him with a chain leading to the trap. It was long enough for him to move around, but not enough for him to reach the front door, or the saw hanging above it. My best guess was the trap had fallen on its own while he was out, and at some point, he'd done a supply run in the dark, and probably had gotten caught in his own trap. He probably died of thirst or something. Look, I'm telling you, he wasn't breathing, and he wasn't moving. He was dead as a doornail, and had been for quite some time. I sat there, reasoning I'd been delirious the night before. The fatigue, the dehydration, the disorientation caused by the blizzard. It made me imagine a voice. Those slow hissing sounds I thought were replies were just the wind outside. I interpreted them wrong because the loneliness had finally gotten to me. The elements had conspired against me to create a living person out of someone who definitely wasn't living. It was a good logical explanation, and I wish I could say it was true. I'm an avid hunter. I go every season and I love it. More often than not, I don't kill any game, but I just love getting out in the woods. I don't know if you're familiar with hunting seasons in Pennsylvania, but during late November, rifle season is in full swing. It was already the second week of the season and I had yet to bag any deer, so I was eager to get to it early in the morning. And I did. I normally get up around 5 a.m. and drive to my hunting spot. It's private land that my grandfather owns, and him and I are the only two to hunt on it, and the rest is posted to hunters. The only others on the land are employed on my grandfather's farm. I had originally planned on calling my grandfather when I woke up and asking him if he wanted to tag along, but the weather that morning was horrendous. The snow was pouring down and the wind was really strong. You see, I love hunting in the snow, but it almost made me decide not to go, so I knew he wouldn't want to. The roads were really bad, so it took me a bit longer to drive there. Normally, the sun would be starting to rise by now, however, it was overcast and snowing. Regardless of the snow, I walked up to my spot. It was directly behind my grandfather's house, over a hill and back about 100 to 150 yards. Almost immediately upon sitting in my spot, I hear things moving all around me. Honestly, I didn't pay it much mind. It could be any number of things, but it was still pitch black, and the thought that it was a deer had crossed my mind, but there wasn't much I could do. It's not like I can shoot at it, so I just ignore it and continue to wait. It wasn't much longer after that I began hearing something walking just over the ridge to my right. At this point, there's barely enough light to see my feet, so even if it was a deer, there was still nothing I could do. However, I could tell it wasn't a deer. I just assumed it was my grandfather walking to his spot, which is just a short walk from mine. But the lights in his house were off, and if he was hunting up here, I'm sure he would let me know prior. But even if it wasn't him, it was a hunter, albeit hunting illegally. I still wanted to let him know I was there, so I turned on my flashlight and pointed it in his direction, flashing it several times. Again, even if it was a deer, I couldn't shoot it, so I felt it was better to be safe rather than sorry. Nothing much happened after that. After I flashed my light, the noise stopped, which was really odd. I didn't hear them turn back, so I figured they either A, sat down right there after seeing my light, which is considered extremely rude, or B, I didn't hear them walk off. I just assumed it was the latter. An hour or so passes, and finally the first sights of daylight start to shine through. It's still snowing and the snow is falling in entire snowballs rather than snowflakes, so visibility is pretty limited. But I just grinned. I love snow, and even if I couldn't see any deer, I still found the weather beautiful. It was around this time that I noticed an odd-looking lump protruding out from a group of trees and shrubs atop the hill that separates me from my granddad's house, right where I had heard movement earlier. It looked like a mound of dirt, however it was sticking out from the side of a tree, so it obviously wasn't dirt. Naturally, I raised my rifle up to take a closer look. I could immediately tell that I was looking at the side of an older style camouflage coat. It took a minute, but it finally clicked. That was a person over there. I just thought it was a hunter, so I didn't know what to do about it. I knew he was hunting on our land illegally, and from what I could see, he wasn't wearing anything orange, which is required of all hunters during the rifle season. And I could tell just from looking, whoever this wasn't my grandfather. I sat there for a minute debating my next move, but I decided to call my granddad at the risk of blowing his hunt, if that was him over there. So without taking my eyes off this guy, I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. To my dismay, he picked up. I told him what was going on. So he told me he'd make his way up, but I decided to go on my own to give the guy a whistle to let him know I see him, but he didn't react at all. After a few minutes, I started to walk up to this guy. After walking the short distance, I could clearly see him. He was sound asleep, tucked in between a shrub and a couple of trees. He obviously thought out where to lay down, as I would have never have been able to see him had his coat not stuck out. And as I thought, he had no orange on. I gave him another whistle, much louder, and he woke right up, almost immediately shuffling over to hide his exposed coat. He had a nasty scruffy beard and a gray hat. Honestly, he looked like a harmless old homeless man, probably in his 50s. But he had a perfect view of my granddad's home from his spot, and I have a pretty good idea what he was planning to do once my granddad left the house. Once this guy realized he had been caught though, and saw a mad 6'5" guy carrying a hunting rifle less than 10 yards away. Making his way closer, his face went pale. Almost instantly, he tried to feed me some bullshit that he had gotten lost during a drive with a group of other hunters. For those of you that don't know, a drive is a coordinated push through a thicket in order to drive deer to hunters sitting at the end of the designated driving area. However, the closest public game land is miles from this spot, so I knew this was a lie. He just kept on going about how he was lost and how he fell asleep. He even went as far to make up a fake name on the spot. I just stood there and listened, making sure he didn't make any fishy movements. I couldn't help but think about what this guy could have done to my grandfather. God knows he had the chance, and that thought pissed me off enough to tell the guy to shut the hell up. That's about the point where I saw my granddad. My granddad is a tough old bastard, so my first thought was, this idiot is going to get himself killed. Luckily, nothing happened. After he got there, we practically had to drag this guy down the road, where my granddad called the cops and I called my dad. Technically, this guy hadn't done anything wrong yet, so all we could charge him with was trespassing and stalking. That was about a month ago, and since then, I haven't heard anything else about him.